Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're keeping on with our pandemic projects, trying to do one of these a day while the pandemic continues. This one's came by way of Fred. It's a Mitchell 308. It's a later version of the 308. It's almost a 308A. You can tell that generally by the cases. The original 308s had a little bit different design in the case and different setups. So let's we're going to take this apart. I'm going to show you how to service this reel if you have one, and how to keep this one running for years to come. I always start by removing the exterior pieces, so I'm going to take the spool off first. You'll notice on the spool that we have an axle shaft that comes through, and then we have a nut holding on our rotor case. We're going to remove the handle so that we can service the main gear underneath, but I do that before I take the case off. And then we have a broad screw here on the case. So let's go ahead and take that off, and then we'll show you how to remove the rest of it. These reels have stood the test of time. This one, according to Fred, is just needs a little servicing, only because it's a little sluggish. So here's your inside of the 308, and it's a relatively uncomplicated design in that it has a crosswind block. There's a stud riding on the main gear. There's two pins that hold that block in, and then the rest is simply the rotor up top. So let's go ahead, we'll pull those two pins. They go in through the axle shaft. I'll just lay them here so you can see them. So these are your two pins, and that small end of the pin actually sits into the axle shaft. And once you do that, then you can remove the axle shaft simply by pulling up on it. Then you can remove your crosswind block. Now notice that there's a ridge in that, or an indentation, a U-shape in that crosswind block. That's the way it's going to sit when you reinstall. And here's the stud on the main gear that the crosswind block rides on. In order, I'm feeling that grease, it's very thick. That's one of the reasons why I wear a protective glove. I wish I could do that on my working hand, but that doesn't always work out for me. But there's thick grease there. We'll go clean that up. And you can't get the main gear out without taking the rotor off. In order to take the rotor off, you need to remove the nut up top here. And interestingly enough, Mitchell makes a product for it. It's probably can find them on eBay or something. They're about $10 or $12. This is the older version. They make a shinier version, but like everything else, that's an old friend of mine, and it's been around a long time, and I just continue to use that. And basically it's a 12 millimeter socket with a screwdriver on it. And if you don't have the tool, don't rush out and buy one, unless you plan to make a career out of servicing old Mitchell reels. But just simply get a deep socket for a ratchet wrench and use that. This is hard. If you had a 12 millimeter, it's hard getting that nut in there, or that wrench in there to remove that nut. So it's always a good idea to use the deep socket if you could. When you remove that, then you can unscrew your you want to unscrew the rotor. I'm just taking care here. I don't want to rip the teeth on the main gear, but this does unscrew. We've got it started. I'm just going to put a little bit of WD-40 on there just to help with that. And that'll enable you to remove the top rotor here. And we have our little, there's a shim washer here you got to get off. I have a knife that's a little too thick for this. Okay, and I removed that shim because I wanted to show you something here. You didn't have to take the shim off, but there's a hex nut here. Don't think that you have to take that hex nut off. This assembly is actually an assembly that's held on by a pin. It's got some, I'm not sure if this is the same one. We'll find out in a minute, but there's ball bearings under here. So you don't want to pull this nut because those ball bearings are going to spin and go all over the place. It's just the design of the piece. This might be from the 408, I'm not sure. But regardless, see this little ridge here? That's held in by a set screw, and that's how you remove this. There's a set screw right over here, and you want to grab that micro screwdriver and pull the set screw out. Now this isn't the only reel that Mitchell uses a set screw on, so don't be surprised if you're working on another one and you got to pull a bearing, for example, on a 302, I think it is, and the bearing is held in with the set screw. So, and take care of that one. You lose that little piece and you're in trouble. Now we should be able to pull the whole assembly out, and I'm not going to remove it. It's hard to see because there's some grease in there. I'm actually going to use some WD-40 just as a general degreaser for that. This may be what's slowing this reel down here. I'm noticing that there's quite a bit of grease on that component there. So I'm just going to use it. WD-40 I use as a degreaser, not as a lubricant. And I'm just clearing the tracks there and clearing some of that excess off. Now I'm just going to use some Real X oil. I'm going to lube the shaft, both sides. Just going to sit that in my parts tray. We didn't talk about my parts tray earlier. I use a parts tray for all the pieces and the parts that I take off of a reel. That way I know where to find them when it comes time to reinstall. Just cleaning up the inside of the rotor while I'm at it. There's seems like there's a little bit of dirt trapped behind there, so let's take care of that while we're at it. And then a little bit of oil onto the trip mechanism. Make sure that this is firing okay. When that trip mechanism comes around, it's going to hit a ramp. It's going to flip this little arm, and that's what's going to cause this to trip back, and this one's firing fine. If you were to service this bail, you're going to have to take this rotor out, this trip mechanism out. Notice the location of the spring. The spring is a wraparound spring on this collar, and that's going to send this trip arm underneath here. When that trip arm hits this ramp, that's what's going to cause the arm to push out like that and disconnect. Oh, it's hard for me to do that. Disconnect and fire that. So that's the piece here. Once you take that pinion gear out, then you can remove the main gear. Just going to grab a little Phillips head so I don't damage the main gear as I push it out. And this is another reason why this is sluggish, is because it's almost like pushing through. Yeah, it's just totally dry and gummed up. And I'm just working on the back here. I'm just checking this. You can see that there's a lot of gummed up grease and the like that is accumulated around the anti-reverse dog here. It's also missing the lever here. Let's take this dog off. Just rests on a stud. There's a spring here with a little tag arm in it that hides in that, rests in that area. But this hole underneath here is kind of full of old grease and dried residue and the like, so I'm just going to flood it with that. Again, I'm using the WD-40 as a cleaner degreaser. This is the tag arm from the anti-reverse dog. Put that right next to it. Kind of tough to see because it's on brown. And we'll just get that all cleaned up there so that works efficiently. I'm just going to grab a paper towel and make sure we got it all nice and clean there. Here's your spring. Your spring goes around the stud that the dog rests on. Okay, so when properly set then, you have the tag arm comes down, it wraps around that stud, it comes under and it rests on this back shoulder here of that anti-reverse. And then when you go to turn your anti-reverse to the off position, that diamond is going to pull it out. Now when you go to reinstall this, after we've taken care of the servicing on that, make sure that's in the off position. If you put it in the on position, these teeth are going to catch that beak, if you will, and a little hold fast, and it could make it tough. All right, this has just got a bunch of shellacked grease on it. I'm going to use some steel wool, and again, I'm going to use the WD-40 not as a lubricant, but as a general degreaser here. And then I'm just going to kind of polish it, if you will, with the 4-0 steel wool, just to get that old stuff off. And you can see how it's kind of mushing up here with the old stuff. I guess mushing must be a technical term or something, but you can just see how the old grease has just kind of come up. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to wipe this down first. That's a whole different look there on the main gear. Let's go ahead and do the same on this side. And again, it's hard to describe on the video here, but it's very pasty. And so what's happening here as that main crosswind block is riding up and down on it, it's kind of sticking to the piece. That's better. Alrighty, that will help us a lot in terms of the reinstall. Just feeling the back here, and that's nice and loose as well. So let's go reinstall this. We'll take a fishing reel oil. I'm not a Mitchell purist. I'm going to use Penn Precision Reel Grease for this. My points on lubrication is make sure it's a fishing reel grease. Doesn't matter whose it is, but it does matter that it's a fishing reel grease. Then as we go to do the front end of this, you're going for two spots. You're going where the crosswind block is. So you want to make sure you get some nice grease on that. And then you want to get the grease into the teeth. Okay, once we do that, then we can reinstall, making sure that that is off. I can feel just how it slid in there, how much easier that is already. All right, I'm going to back that down to the bottom. I come over here to the assembly, which we previously oiled. We're going to make sure first that that channel is clean. It is, but I just for emphasis, there's a little bit laying there, so let's make sure we do that. We've got a gear here, so let's get some grease onto the gear. I turned that upside down, so the main gear is probably sliding out. That's how much better it's running. All right, we're going to go ahead and we want to mesh the gears. Come back to this side, find that little set screw. And I'm going to use that micro screwdriver to put that back in. That will hold the assembly in place. Now, I always tell folks, take pictures along the way. I seem to be remembering how all of this works, but don't trust your memory. Take pictures along the way. I'm kind of doing that with the video we're doing here, but don't trust your memory. Take pictures, and if you get stuck, you can always go back and reference the pictures. Schematics. Mitchell schematics are available on a site called the Mitchell Reel Museum, I believe, something like that. But they're getting harder and harder to find, so if you have one of these and you don't know what you're in for, take a look. That schematic would have showed you that you need the I'm holding the gear here just to make sure that I can get the rotor on. That schematic would have showed you the little set screw. So now we're going to put the rotor screw back on. Use that little tool to do that. Again, use a deep socket, throw that around. Got it all working right. Keep that stud to the bottom. This is a good time to put the handle back on. You don't need that main gear sliding around, and the handle will hold it in place. And actually it'll, look at that, Fred, huh? That's nice without moving or anything, huh? All right, so then we have our little crosswind block, and again, this has got that kind of sticky stuff on it. So let's go ahead and clean that off. A little bit of grease into that channel so it slides easily. I'm going to grab that and put that over the stud. Take our axle shaft and also clean that. Again, all of this, whatever that grease was that was on there, it wasn't very slippery. There's 2 holes there. That's what you're going for with the pins. So when you go to reinstall this, then line those 2 holes up like this. And I have a little set of pins. You probably have seen them in other videos. Just stick one of them in there if you have. Use a toothpick, something else. It'll just kind of steady it while you put the other one in. And then once you got the other one in, you can come back, remove that, put the second one in here. That's the way we found it when we opened up the case. You can see we're going nicely. You want to put that anti-reverse back on. Nice click action going there. Let's take the side plate, put that back on. Now there's a little groove up here. You slip the side plate under, just like that. Grab that nice shiny screw. And just put the spool back on. We'll give it a test drive, make sure everything's working, and get this one back to Fred. I got a little click there from something. So that's always, there was a little piece of line. Probably can see it here. Well, at any rate, there was a little piece of line that was floating in here. That's what was causing that little click, click, click. Gone. Alrighty, there it is. The Mitchell 308 in this configuration. We showed you how to take this reel apart by removing the side plate. We showed you how to use a deep socket to remove the hold-fast nut for the rotor, and then how to unscrew the rotor. And then when we got down to servicing the main gear, we told you that there is an assembly here. That's the pinion gear assembly. Warned you not to remove this. I don't know if that's the one with the bearings or if it's the 408 with the bearings. I'm going to apologize right up front for my lack of knowledge there. But don't pull that nut because that's holding the bearings in, and these bearings are free-floating bearings. Pull the whole assembly out, grease this. When you have the assembly out, you can push the main gear through the body, and when you push the main gear through the body, that gives you the ability to clean the backside of the gear, service the anti-reverses we did, and put this one back to good use. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, please like it and subscribe. To all of you that are first responders or know first responders that are acting on our behalf during this pandemic, please say thank you to them on my behalf and on behalf of all of us that are trying to do our best to help everybody overcome this. So with this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.